Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Malik, and I'm going to review photosynthesis and respiration today. So we're going to start with our heterotrophs. Heterotrophs are the animals. They can't create their own energy, they've got to eat it. So they're going to gain energy by eating food and breaking it down into the components that provide energy. So we're going to use cellular respiration to do this. All right, so in cellular respiration, animals are eating glucose. They're simple sugars. That glucose is going to be broken down into water and carbon dioxide as waste products and energy that they can use for any simple everyday activities. In the next step, we're going to look at photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the process where plants can make their own food. They harness the light energy and those waste products from cellular respiration, water and carbon dioxide, to create sugars. They're going to do this through a process called photosynthesis. The sugars are also, as a result, they're also going to create a waste product, oxygen. Oxygen was needed by the animals when they're going to break down that food into its component energy and water and carbon dioxide. Now, in photosynthesis, energy is going to be stored in the plant as food for itself and for other organisms that eat the plant. All right, so photosynthesis. We're going to take this a small step at a time with an animation that I created to help show you the process. Okay, so photosynthesis starts with carbon dioxide. So I've created some carbon dioxide molecules here. The carbons are in black and the oxygens are white. Okay, so we're also going to need water. So our water molecules here are shown with, again, the oxygen in white, and our hydrogen atoms are going to be red. Now, in the process of photosynthesis, we're going to add light energy. This light energy is going to rearrange our carbon molecules so that we can form the simple sugar glucose, and we're going to have a waste product in oxygen molecule. All right, so the process is going to look a little bit like this. All right, so in forming this glucose molecule, we have stored energy. Our delta G is a positive number. That's going to be stored energy. And that energy is actually going to be stored in these bonds with the carbons and hydrogen atoms. And then as a result, we also have oxygen as a waste product that is released by the plant out of the stroma. So let's review. We've got carbon molecules coming from the carbon dioxide and our hydrogen and oxygen coming from our water. Remember, water and carbon dioxide are essential for the plant to produce or to go through photosynthesis. That carbon dioxide is going to come in through the stroma of the leaves. That water is going to be taken in by the roots of our plant, and in the presence of light, is going to break our carbons from our carbon dioxide and break those bonds between the carbons and oxygen, and we're going to end up forming our glucose molecule. And as a waste product, oxygen that will get released again from the plant into the environment. Those sugars are going to get stored inside the plant. Okay, so photosynthesis isn't quite as simple as all that makes it look. Okay, so let's look at the word photosynthesis. Photo means light. Okay, so we have our light reaction portion of photosynthesis, and I like to remember the light reaction as related to that photo portion of our word. And then synthesis means to build. And so that synthetic part where we're going to build our sugar molecules, that's going to take place through the Calvin cycle. Okay, so remember, all of this is going to take place in the chloroplasts. All right, so let's look at the light reaction. The light reaction is going to take place first in our thylakoid space. Those thylakoid membranes, if we stack them all on top of each other, that forms something we call a granum. Now, chloroplasts, as you can see here in our cells, they're pretty small, filled with green pigment. The liquid portion of that chloroplast is called the stroma. All right, so our light reactions take place in this way. We have water that's come in through the plant, and light. Now that light breaks the water down and we release oxygen. In the process of doing this breakdown, we create ATP and NADPH. That process of creating that oxygen and ATP and NADPH Now we're going to, after that process, we're now going to enter the Calvin cycle. Okay, so the Calvin cycle is going to take place in the stroma of the cells. That's that liquid portion of our chloroplasts. The part where it's green and you can see, well, that's what makes the plant look green. You see those chloroplasts. So in the Calvin cycle, we're going to take that ATP and NADPH, and we're going to use it with carbon dioxide that the plant has taken in through its leaves, and we're going to then build our sugar molecule with that. All right, so let's look a little bit more closely at our light reaction. All right, so the light reaction, remember, is taking place in that thylakoid membrane. The thylakoid membrane has a lot of proteins in it. It's not important to know all the names of all the proteins, but let's talk about what's going to happen within that membrane, mostly the electron transport chain. All right, so light is going to come along and it's going to hit photosystem 1 and photosystem 2. Photosystem 1 and 2 are where we actually store the chlorophyll. Okay, so when chlorophyll is excited by light energy hitting it, it actually will use electrons. And where is it going to get those electrons? It's going to get them from the water molecules. That water molecule here is going to break down into oxygen and protons. And those electrons are going to be released and they're going to move through the electron transport chain. Now, it's going to move through a whole series of different proteins. And as it moves through the proteins, it's going to eventually make its way out of the membrane and make NADPH. It's going to end up in the NADPH. Okay, so on its way there, that water is going to get broken to oxygen and those protons, which are really just hydrogen atoms without their electrons. That electron from those hydrogen atoms is going to move through the electron transport chain, and through the different proteins, it's going to use the energy to pump hydrogen atoms inside the thylakoid membrane. So we're going to go down in through the membrane into that thylakoid space, and we're going to pump a ton of hydrogen ions in there. And as we increase all those hydrogen ions, we're going to have a positive charge on the inside of the membrane. And then once we have all these hydrogen ions, where are they all going to go? So they're going to want to leave the membrane and they're going to go out through another protein called ATP synthase. In the process of pumping out, those hydrogen ions are going to create ATP. All right, so as a quick review here, we are going to take light, break water to create hydrogen ions. We're going to take those electrons, move it through the electron transport chain up to NADPH, and using the energy of those electrons, we're going to pump a bunch of hydrogen ions inside the membrane, and eventually those will move out of the membrane, creating ATP in the process. Okay, so what's our next step? Our next step is to enter in the Calvin cycle. In the Calvin cycle, we're going to take carbon dioxide and that ATP and NADPH that we made in the light reactions, and we're going to use them to build simple sugars. So we're going to take carbon molecules from our carbon dioxide, we're going to take the energy from ATP and NADPH, and we're going to build simple sugars made from those carbon molecules. All of this is going to take place again in the stroma of our chloroplasts. That's that liquid portion of the chloroplasts. Okay, so now let's look at cellular respiration. Cellular respiration, remember, is our way to use energy in organisms that are heterotrophs. These organisms can't create their own food, so they rely on eating foods and breaking it down to get that stored energy out of the foods. Again, I think that sometimes it gets complicated if you don't understand exactly what's happening with the molecules, so I've created this animation to show you what's going to happen. So here we have our glucose molecule. It's made up of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen atoms, and we also have our oxygen molecules. Okay, so oxygen molecules are also required for this process to take place. What I'd like you to notice is that our delta G for this process is a negative number. And basically what that means is that energy is going to be released in the process of breaking our glucose molecule into carbon dioxide and water. And what the process would look like is something like this. So notice that energy has been released in the process of making all of our carbon dioxide and water molecules, which basically serve as waste products. So we get energy from it, we get ATP, and we're going to get the byproducts of carbon dioxide and water. Okay, so where does this take place? It's taking place in our mitochondria. Now, I've got this picture of a mitochondria here, and let's look a little bit at the I guess the makeup of the mitochondria. So we have, again, we're also going to have oxygen in. We need oxygen for this process, so we're going to have oxygen that's being delivered to our mitochondria. The oxygen is going to come in through the outer membrane. So the outer membrane is noted here. Our inner membrane is here, and it's the membrane that's kind of like a squiggly shape on the inside. It's got lots and lots of folds that create this inner membrane space between the outer membrane and the inner membrane. Those folds have a name. They're called the cristae. Basically, their purpose is to create extra surface area. We've got a lot more surface area inside for the process of cellular respiration to take place, and we call the whole, these are our cristae, then we call the whole thing the matrix. Okay, so our matrix is made up of all these cristae, all these folds of that inner membrane. Okay, so let's look at the steps of cellular respiration. Okay, so we're going to start with glycolysis. Glycolysis is going to take place in the cytoplasm of the cell. Okay, in the process of glycolysis, we're going to take glucose, a 6-carbon sugar, and we're going to create pyruvate, 2 3-carbon sugars. In that process, we're going to, basically breaking down that 6-carbon sugar into 2 3-carbon sugars, we're going to release some ATP. All right, so now we're going to take that pyruvate and we're going to enter into the Krebs cycle. So the Krebs cycle is going to take place inside the matrix. That's the inside of that inner membrane area. So we're going to go inside the matrix and we're going to take that pyruvate and put it through the Krebs cycle. Now the Krebs cycle is, again, it's got a lot of steps in it that you don't necessarily need to know all of the steps along the way, but what's important in the Krebs cycle is that we are going to make NADH and FADH2, and they're going to be stored as energy so that we can then use the electron transport system in that inner membrane to release energy for use by the animal. Okay, so that Krebs cycle is going to take place again in the matrix, and it's going to result in electrons that can be released from NADH, stored energy in NADH and FADH2, and that's going to take place along the inner membrane. All right, so let's look at the electron transport system now. So again, this here is our inner membrane, this right here, and this is the inner membrane space. Okay, so this is inside our, this is in between our outer membrane and our inner membrane here in this space here. This is the inner membrane space. So then in here, this is where our matrix is located. Okay, so remember we created in the Krebs cycle NADH and FADH, which is stored energy, and those electrons from NADH and FADH are going to be able to pass through our electron transport system. So they're going to move through a series of, we're going to move these electrons through a series of proteins, again, just like we did in photosynthesis. And as we do, we're going to take hydrogen ions and pump them out through a hydrogen pump within that membrane. So we're going to pump hydrogen ions out using that energy from the electrons, and we're going to then be able to increase that hydrogen ion content on the inner membrane space, and that's going to then make its way back into the cell through our ATP synthase complex, just like back in photosynthesis. So hydrogen ions are going to come in, it's going to create ATP. Magic. All right, so where did we get those ions again? Those electrons, we're going to get them, or where's those electrons going to end up? They're going to end up joining in with oxygen and hydrogen to make water as one of our byproducts. There we are. Hydrogen plus the oxygen is water. So thanks for listening in to today's review for photosynthesis and cellular respiration. I hope that helps.